Welcome to the OahspeCollegeUniversity Solution to Ancient Knowledge. Topic of discussion today is overview of what familiar spirits are. There's been a minor debate, argument, or confusion between in the spiritual community, and that has to do with what spiritual book you're used to. And one of the things is that, people are not understanding that familiar spirits are our ancestors, the fathers, mothers, uncles, relatives, brothers and sisters who have died previously in our world. That's what familiar spirits are. And you can begin to start to categorize it. But what happened is the other spiritual book that people, if you're not reading the OahspeCollegeUniversity, what happens is you're not used to this, terminology. You're used to the term that your preacher or your pastor or your spiritual father give to you. So one of the argument that came back to me was that familiar spirits are evil spirits, familiar spirits are demon. So my argument back is that if familiar spirits are evil spirits, then your grandfather was an evil spirit, is an evil spirit, your father who's dead, your mother who's dead, any of your relatives who have died are evil spirits. And it's logical, right? Because OahspeCollegeUniversity gives a category and classify clearly stating that familiar spirits are fathers, mothers, and brothers who are not dead long. So in other words, they died not too long. It could be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? So they still become familiar spirits because they still live in our world. So I'm just going to quickly, go down to the OahspeCollegeUniversity and come up with the verse where it actually classify this and clarify this. There are other verses in the OahspeCollegeUniversity, don't get me wrong, but I like to show the picture clearly so that you don't say that you need to go to the doctor and get yourself a high glasses. Okay. So in the book of Sapphire, Manga had dark of degree of golden chamber, verse 32, who are familiar spirits. Verse 33, our fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, and other relatives and friends who have not been dead long, and other spirits who have not learned of or risen to the heavens above earth atmosphere. So when they say they have not risen above earth atmosphere, they're talking about Etheria. So that means they've not been drafted to Etheria. So they become bound to our heaven, which is the atmospheric heaven. If you're not read OahspeCollegeUniversity before and you've not got this clarification of the classes of heaven, I would suggest you subscribe to my YouTube video. Go down the list, just do a search. I've done numerous of video about this. Many of these abide on the earth and with mortals. Some for few years, you see that? Some for 100 years. Some for 1,000 years. So what this verse in verse 33 is clearly saying to you, without needing an eyeglasses, is that they are familiar spirits, they are fathers, ancestors who are still with us and they're still bound to our world for 1,000 years. So which means they are familiar spirits. It's very easy. And I'm going to go to the book of Ab, chapter 11, verse 5. The book of Ab, chapter 11, verse 5. Verse 5. This was done, and they were divided into groups. Then, since the angels of heaven have already numbered the corporeans or humans, and the Ethereans. Ethereans are angels who no longer have desire for our world. You can classify them as your Holy Spirit because they don't sin anymore. Were distributed accordingly. And these Ethereans selected and apportioned familiar spirits to abide with the barbarians. And these familiar spirits, listen to this verse, and these familiar spirits were the fathers, mothers, and friends who had recently died, but still sojourn in the first resurrection. So first resurrection heaven is just right on top of our world. So these offices provided places on earth for these spirits and persuaded them to reappear before mortals in order to prove continued life. But the officers never showed themselves. Right, you see that? So there you have it. So just to clear the waters, to clear the air out there, to clear the so-called spiritual books, to clear all the so-called spiritual teachers, preachers, and pastors that misinform followers, that misinform students, spiritual students. They're misinforming people, and they're coming up with their own definition of familiar spirit because the book they read does not even define it. So, if familiar spirits, according to your book, are evil spirits or demons, that means that your fathers, your ancestors are also evil spirits or demons. That's what it means, and there's no other way to kind of go around this. So we have to come to the term and agree that familiar spirits are our ancestors and they've not died that long. Probably 10 years, according to this verse. It says, and these familiar spirits were the fathers, mothers, and friends who have recently died, but still sojourn in the first resurrection. And when you look at the book of Sapphira, it clearly says, many of these abide on the earth with mortals, some for few years, some for 100 years, and some for 1,000 or more. So you could have a familiar spirit who are still living in our world, abiding with your family members, living with your family members for 1,000 years, which, in Africa, in Nigeria, where I come from, we call those familiar spirit oracle. So I don't want to go into more deeper verses in the OahspeCollegeUniversity, but some years back, I did a video about reincarnations. Reincarnation spirits also decodes this, explain this. So the familiar spirits are not classified that much as reincarnated spirit, because reincarnated spirits, their categories for them to come upon your spirit and dwell with your spirit, So OahspeCollegeUniversity does a fantastic job by identifying the classification of spirits that we're dealing with. So for those who are trying to get clarity, the OahspeCollegeUniversity College spiritual understanding to provide to people so that they could understand this in time to come. Now, today, could be tomorrow. You could forward this video to your family members. If you've not got yourself an OahspeCollegeUniversity, they are on eBay, Amazon. You could get yourself one. OahspeCollegeUniversity gives clarity about definitions of spirits. It tells you lots of stuff. Years back, I did a summary about what OahspeCollegeUniversity is and what it does talk about. I spent over 20 minutes explaining this, giving a summary of it, what OahspeCollegeUniversity teaches. Brothers and sisters, in the near future, I'm going to be doing more video that explains more about reincarnated spirits, because that's another state of confusion that we're in. But I am going to post a video about summary about reincarnated spirits. Today's video was just giving that overview of this is just a summary saying what reincarnated, saying exactly what familiar spirits are. Familiar spirits are your ancestors. Those are your mothers, your uncles, your brothers and sisters who have died in our world. And they've not lived, they've not drafted, or they've not graded themselves out of first heaven. They've not even entered second heaven. They've not even entered third heaven. And finally, they've not even entered Etheria. They are still abiding in our world and also abiding in first heaven, mingling around with humans, And familiar spirits, yes, does provide what they call answers to people. So they are the one who are posing in temples, in psychic temples, in churches, and they, give what you call an oracle. And in Nigeria, we have tons of oracle there, right? You go to a village in Nigeria or any village in, in Africa, they'll say, oh, let's go consult with the oracle. What they're really saying is, let's go and consult with the familiar spirit. Okay. So, here you have it. Here's the video. I just wanted to clarify this into a couple of people who had posed this question. Light and peace, brothers and sisters. Until the next video,